Water dripped from my hair as I struggled with a high fever.
You're too lazy. I'm having my friends over for drinking party, so make sure the house is clean.
My husband, Chris, shouted at me as I desperately tried to take care of the twins by myself. Chris neither helped with the kids nor assisted me in any way. If he valued his friends more than his family, I no longer need him. I'll clean it up. Quietly, I seethed with anger at Chris, who couldn't understand my words. My name is Emily, and I'm a 29-year-old stay-at-home mom. I've been married to my husband, Chris, for 4 years. I used to work, but I quit when I got pregnant. I was doing well as a full-time employee, and they encouraged me to take maternity and childcare leave, but I refused. Why? Because, surprisingly, I was pregnant with twins. With my first childbirth being twins, I didn't feel I could return to work within a year or two. Sure, I might be able to manage if I put them in daycare, but there would be times when I'd get called because of sudden fevers or something. With two kids, it was clear that it would interfere with my job. My company was understanding, but during busy seasons, it was really hectic. I didn't have the mental strength to leave on time without doing any overtime. Besides, we had enough savings, owned our home, and had no mortgage, so Chris's income could cover our monthly expenses. So, I decided to quit my job. Being pregnant with twins was tough. I don't have a singleton pregnancy to compare it to, but my morning sickness was terrible. My friends who had been pregnant told me it would get better once I reached the second trimester, but before that, it was so bad I needed IV treatments. I held on to the hope that things would improve in the second trimester, but when the doctor told me there really isn't a stable period with twins, I felt hopeless. As the babies grew, it became harder to move around. That's when a husband's support should be invaluable, but Chris was completely oblivious. He kept going to frequent drinking parties and hanging out with friends, just like before I was pregnant. I knew he was a social person, but I couldn't believe he continued to have fun while I was suffering. When I occasionally expressed my frustration, he got defensive. Can you help out around the house sometimes?
If you're a stay-at-home mom, you should handle it.
People often say that men change once the baby is born, but I couldn't believe it, and my doubts turned into reality.
There's a work party tonight, so I'll be late.
I think that's what Chris said, but I didn't really listen anymore. Raising our twins after they were born was intense. One would cry for milk, and just when I thought it was over, the other would cry for milk. Even worse than crying separately was when they cried simultaneously, and I had to feed them both with bottles at the same time. At night, one would start crying, and just when I got them back to sleep, the other would start crying, and sometimes they both cried at the same time.
Keep it down. I have to get up early tomorrow. Make them quiet.
In this situation where I couldn't get any sleep, those were the inconsiderate words Chris uttered. Even though I was overwhelmed with taking care of the twins, Chris didn't help at all. But I didn't even have the energy to snap at him. Whenever I tried to say something to Chris, one of the twins would start crying, and I'd be too busy taking care of them. Then, to top it all off, Chris said,
Emily, ever since the kids were born, you've been cold to me.
"You've always been cold to me." I was disappointed to discover this side of Chris that I hadn't noticed before getting pregnant. He was never the type to be fond of kids, but I didn't expect him to be this indifferent to his own children. Now that I think about it, I haven't seen Chris hold the kids much since they were born, feeding them, changing their diapers. I suddenly realized Chris had hardly any interaction with the kids. Maybe it's my fault because I end up doing everything myself. Perhaps if I forced him to help, he would develop a sense of responsibility as a father. Both Chris's and my families live far away. Additionally, my parents are taking care of my grandmother, and his parents are taking care of his grandfather. So we can't rely on either set of parents. That meant Chris had to step up, or I wouldn't be able to handle it. We wanted these kids, and I didn't want to be overwhelmed by them. So, despite the hassle, I decided to train Chris. Hey, the kids are crying. Can you hold them?
I'm busy right now.
What's so busy about messing with your phone? It's tough feeding both at the same time. Can you give one a bottle?
I'm busy right now.
What's so busy about lying on the couch watching a comedy show? Can you bring me a clean diaper?
I'm busy right now.
What's so busy about having snacks with a glass of wine? Enough is enough. What is wrong with you? Are you even a father? I finally snapped. But Chris didn't back down.
I'm tired from work. I'm supporting us financially, so you have no right to complain. My friends told me their wives handle everything at home so they can focus on work and relax when they get home. You're the worst for not letting me rest.
You're the worst. Don't you care about them?
I do care. That's why I work hard. You should be more like my friends' wives.
Even if he told me to be like those unknown wives, raising twins is a different world. There's no way I could emulate them. But Chris constantly compared me to his friends' wives, saying things like, at their house, or that wife over there.
Everyone says they feel sorry for me.
The ones you should feel sorry for are these kids. Thinking about our children being ignored by their father brought tears to my eyes. Chris was silent for a moment after I yelled at him.
This is pointless. I'm going out for a drink to relieve some stress.
With that, Chris left. That's exactly what I was telling you not to do. Leave everything at home and go out drinking. In the end, Chris didn't come home until after midnight.
Ventilating my frustrations made me feel so much better.
Chris returned from drinking with his friends, looking relieved, and soon after, he was fast asleep. I didn't feel any relief at all, and once again, I couldn't sleep because of the twins crying. I met a few of Chris's friends soon after we got married, and they all seemed to prioritize their friendships over their families, like the stereotypical dominant husbands. They say birds of a feather flock together, and I bet the wives of Chris's friends are as infuriated as I am.
All my friends' wives are supportive of their husbands.
Chris always said that, but it's likely that, just like Chris, his friends are oblivious to their wives' feelings. I began to question Chris, who prioritized friends and drinking over helping his wife and raising the kids. Hey, do we even need Chris around? However, I had no income. I wanted to raise the kids at home until they were at least preschool age. But if things continued like this, I might have to seriously consider putting them in daycare. It felt sad to think about putting them in daycare so young, but the current situation seemed even worse for them. Their dad was practically non-existent, and their mom was too exhausted from child rearing to smile. Such an environment wasn't good for them at all. I realized I needed to have a serious talk with Chris, and if that didn't work, it might be time to consider other options. Sleep deprived from taking care of the twins, I thought about this in a foggy state of mind. Even having a discussion with Chris would be difficult with the kids around. Yet, asking my parents or his to abandon their caregiving duties and travel such a distance to help us was impossible. So, how should we have this talk? As I pondered this, days continued to pass by. One day, when our twins were just over 3 months old, they started drinking more milk and sleeping for longer periods. I was getting more rest, and maybe because I let my guard down, I developed a high fever. Oh my God. I stared in disbelief at the thermometer. It showed a temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit. I had no cough or runny nose, just a fever and a foggy head. I didn't know if it was a cold or exhaustion, and I couldn't go to the hospital because I couldn't leave the kids. So I sent a desperate message to Chris. You have to come home early today.
No way. My friend invited me out for drinks. It's Friday, come on. You wouldn't understand because you get to stay home all day.
Chris's response was unbelievable. I felt like I was about to explode with anger, but I decided to stay calm and save my anger for when my fever went down and my head was clear. Right now, things were critical. Please, come home. I kept sending messages to Chris persistently. Thanks to that, he came home on time. But the first thing he did was yell at me.
What the hell is wrong with you?
His words pounded in my foggy head. Chris showed no concern for me, even though I was clearly pale and unsteady. He glared at me with a face that screamed he was angry. Please, I need to go to the hospital. Can you watch the kids? As for me, I didn't even have the energy to be angry because of the fever, saying that was the best I could manage.
What? The hospital is already closed.
There is one open until 8 p.m. If I hurry, I can make it. A quick glance at the clock showed it was 7:30 p.m. It's only a 5-minute walk. I can make it in time. I pleaded desperately with Chris.
The pediatrician is open this late?
No, it's not for the kids. It's for me. I have a fever of 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and it won't go down.
What? So you want me to take care of both kids?
Of course. Apparently, Chris thought I was taking one kid to the hospital, so he only needed to watch the other. But once he realized it was both, he yelled.
You've got to be kidding. You want me to take care of 2 kids after coming home tired from work?
Tired from work? You were planning to go out drinking.
It don't need energy to go drinking. Why should I have to do this?
Chris's shouting made my head throb even more intensely. Please, just watch them for a bit. I won't be long.
Absolutely not.
Even as I held my forehead and begged, Chris kept refusing.
You're just too lazy to begin with.
He pointed behind me. There were the clothes I had brought in from the line, still unfolded on the floor.
What's that? If you bring in the laundry, fold it and put it away. How lazy can you be?
I'm overwhelmed with our twins, and I just don't have time.
That's just an excuse. You can't do what everyone else manages because you're just taking advantage of how easy you have it.
That's not fair. I do what I can when I can.
Then do it now.
But now I have a fever. Our conversation was going nowhere. Time was slipping by, and the clinic would be closing soon. Just let me go to the hospital first. I'll listen to your complaints later. I pressed my throbbing head and tried to get ready to leave, but suddenly Chris grabbed my arm.
Not happening.
What?
I canceled my plan because of you. So as an apology, I'm having my friends over for drinks another day.
What?
This messy place is embarrassing. Make sure you clean it up.
What are you saying? Are you out of your mind? Frustrated and incredulous at his unreasonable demands, I glared at him. Immediately, I heard a splash and water started dripping from my bangs. What just happened? In front of me, Chris was smirking. In his hand, he held a water bottle that he had somehow gotten without me noticing.
If you have a fever, pouring water on you should cool you down. How do you feel? Is your fever gone?
What are you?
I don't have time to deal with your selfishness. Got it? Like I said, I'm having friends over, so clean up the house. Don't slack off just because you say you have a fever.
Don't invite people over without asking me.
It's my house. I can do whatever I want.
What did you say? What? He said my house. This is a family home where I live with our children, but Chris thinks it's just his house. Maybe my fever went down because of the shock, not because of the water. However, it wasn't the water that cooled me down, but my anger. I was red with anger, not fever, while our twins started crying because of the commotion. Without even glancing at us, Chris left me soaking wet and headed straight to the bathroom. I'll clean this house just the way you want it. I said this, knowing he wouldn't hear me, as he disappeared into the bathroom. Afterward, whether due to dealing with our crying twins or my anger, my fever finally went down. It was probably a sudden fever caused by exhaustion. Chris remained the same, completely uninvolved in childcare. In fact, he became even more demanding. The morning Chris was leaving for a 2-week business trip, he said,
I'm inviting some friends over the day after I get back.
"How many are coming?"
20.
20?
The house is big enough to fit that many. After all, it's my house.
For some reason, Chris seemed proud. He didn't notice the cold look in my eyes. Fine, I'll make sure it's clean.
Make sure you do.
Leaving an order rather than a request, Chris left for his trip. Well, let's get things cleaned up. Left behind, I glanced at our twins sleeping peacefully, smiled slyly, and made a call to a certain place on my phone. 2 weeks later, around the time Chris was supposed to return, I was checking the clock when the phone rang. As expected, it was Chris. "Hello, Chris?"
Hey, what's going on? My house is gone.
The first thing Chris did was shout.
Emily? Hey.
Annoyed, I moved the phone away from my ear as Chris kept yelling. "Calm down, I can hear you." Yelling just makes it harder to understand.
How can I calm down? Why is my house gone? And why is there just an empty lot?
Well, I hired a company to clear the land. I cleaned it up just like you wanted. Any issues with that?
You hired a company? What the hell were you thinking? That's my house.
No, it's my house. As soon as Chris claimed it was his house, I shouted back, and he hesitated on the other end of the line. Not giving him a chance to speak, I continued. That house originally belonged to my parents. They gave it to me, so it's in my name. It never was and never will be yours.
That's...
Yes, the house Chris and I lived in was originally my family home. My parents decided to move because my grandmother's nursing home was quite far away.
We have enough money, so there's no need to sell the family home. What do you want to do?
My dad asked me that before, so I immediately said I would take it. Of course, I paid the gift tax.
Since the house is in your name, I'm not paying the property taxes.
Chris said that when we got married. In other words, even Chris acknowledged that the house was mine. Maybe because of its size, Chris's friends were often envious when they visited. Maybe that's why, at some point, Chris's mind somehow converted it into thinking it was his house. It's a frightening level of self-deception. But that house is undeniably mine. Whether I sell it or clear it, it's my decision. You were barely ever home and didn't care about the house. That's why it was easy for me to get an estimate from the company beforehand.
That's
I asked for your business trip schedule in advance, so I timed everything with the company. First, I packed up the necessary items and moved out. These days, moving companies even do the packing for you, which was really helpful.
what about my stuff?
I sent out a letter to your office. Inside, there's a note with the storage location and the key.
A letter?
Yes, there are also divorce papers in there. I've already signed my part, so make sure you fill out yours. There's an envelope with the lawyer's address too. Just put the papers in there and send it.
Divorce papers? Why? I don't want a divorce.
Because there's no point in us being married. As Chris shouted in shock, I cut him off sharply. You frequently go out drinking, don't take care of our kids when you're home, and all you do is complain to me. Do you think I need someone like that? I don't. And I doubt the kids even recognize you as their father, let alone as part of the family.
That's not true.
Can you honestly say that? Chris fell silent, unable to find a response. It seemed he was aware that he hadn't been involved with the kids.
I'll change. I'll do better from now on.
Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Do you realize that pouring water on me when I had a high fever is something you could be sued for?
That was because you were being lazy.
You're still saying that. You'll never change. This conversation is over. We're definitely getting a divorce. From now on, contact me through the lawyer.
Wait, please.
What? Just as I was about to hang up, Chris, sensing it, hurriedly stopped me. When I asked what he wanted, he shouted in a panicked voice.
What am I supposed to do today? My parents' house is far, and I have to work the day after tomorrow. Where am I supposed to stay tonight?
I don't know. Stay at a hotel or something.
I don't have money for that.
Really? You have money to go drinking, but not for a hotel? You've been keeping all your salary for yourself without contributing to the household expenses. Chris has hardly ever contributed to the household expenses. When we were both working, he wouldn't pay for utilities or groceries, claiming that since the house was mine, he didn't have to cover those costs. After I quit my job, he did start contributing some money to the household, but it was a pittance and nowhere near enough. It wasn't even enough to cover the cost of diapers for the kids. It's amazing how he could act so high and mighty. I was halfway to a nervous breakdown from taking care of the twins and didn't have the energy to confront him about it. We've been getting by dipping into my savings and using child benefits, but I'm at my limit. The house is old, so I'm having it cleared and sold. I plan to find a new place with that money. Currently, I'm staying with my parents who live far away. When I asked for help, they welcomed me with open arms. Having just moved, I don't have the time or energy to worry about where Chris will stay tonight. You're an adult, figure it out. Oh, and why not ask one of your beloved friends to put you up? You were planning to invite 20 of them over. Surely one can help.
They're all married.
Since they're the kind of people who'd crash a house with twin babies for a party, you should have no problem asking for such an unreasonable favor. Chris fell silent again.
I'm sorry.
That was the first time he apologized.
I'm sorry. From now on.
I hung up before he could finish and quickly blocked his number. His fake apologies and excuses no longer affected me. It's too late for anything now. Since he couldn't call, Chris sent me endless messages for a while. Apparently, none of his friends let him stay with them. In the end, Chris spent the night at a motel and complained about it. So much for the friendship of inconsiderate people like them. Or maybe their wives were furious and protested. Well, I don't care about any of those people anymore. Despite some disputes, thanks to my excellent lawyer, the divorce went through smoothly. Chris kept resisting until the end, but no amount of apologizing could change things. Out of curiosity, I asked Chris one last question. Do you remember our kids' names?
Well, Mike and Bob?
They're twin girls. When I yelled at him with a furious expression, Chris turned pale. I was beyond angry. I was shocked by his response. He didn't even remember their gender. How detached could he be from his own children? During the discussion, my mom and I brought my twins with us.
Let me hold them one last time.
When Chris said that, I handed one to him, but the baby started crying loudly and immediately reached out to come back to me. Well, of course, you've never held them since they were born. Chris looked completely defeated afterward. While he has the right to see them, I plan to live near my parents, which is quite far away. If he wants to see them, he'll have to make the effort to travel that distance, but I doubt he will. If he were that devoted and loved the kids, we wouldn't be getting divorced. Not trusting Chris at all, I made him pay child support in a lump sum. He resisted until the end, but when I told him I'd notify his company and garnish his wages if he preferred installments, he reluctantly agreed. Chris didn't want anyone at his company to know about his divorce, but with all the necessary paperwork, it was inevitable. As expected, his attempts to keep it a secret backfired, and rumors spread that he cheated and I left him. Though he likely didn't cheat, prioritizing friends over family in times of need is just as bad in my eyes. He deserves to be looked down upon and to feel ashamed. This is a side note, but Chris's friends did get scolded by their wives for planning a party at a house with twin babies. After that, neither Chris nor his friends had time for parties, and they drifted apart. It seems they realized that ending up divorced like Chris would be bad. As for me, moving closer to my parents has given me much more peace of mind. My grandmother, who needs care, is mostly in a facility, so it doesn't burden my parents too much.
I'm so happy to be with my real grandchildren instead of just looking at pictures.
Seeing my mom so happy is what makes me happiest. With my parents' help, I searched for a job and successfully found one. The twins also got into daycare. Juggling housework, childcare, and a job keeps me incredibly busy, but my days are fulfilling. Raising kids is challenging, but their smiles are my solace. Seeing my adorable twins smile, I finally feel truly happy.